What's up, everyone? This is James Quilty, and welcome to another episode of Funnel Dad Secrets Radio. Today's episode, I wanted to talk about what do you do when you haven't had any success yet? How do you progress? What is the first thing, or what is that next step that you should be taking in order to start moving forward in your business? So let's get to it. Are you struggling to make any kind of money online? Are you overwhelmed with all the tech, social media, and email stuff? Are you starting to think that this online business thing is just not for you? Well, I know how you feel. For years, I struggled to make my first sale online, and after 6 years of failure, I finally started to have some success. My name is James Quilty, and throughout this podcast, I want to share the things that I'm learning as I work to build a six-figure online business, all from home and in my spare time. I know what it's like to struggle, and I want to share everything that I've learned to help new entrepreneurs make their first dollar online. Welcome to Funnel Dad Secrets Radio. So, like I said in the intro, what do you do when you haven't had any success yet? Right? A lot of us, we have this dream of being financially free, not having to work a job, being able to pay off all of our debt, having that lifestyle where we can go and do things that we want to do, and financially, that is not the place that it holds us back, right? We all have those dreams, and so somewhere along the road, somebody had suggested, or we were presented with an opportunity, whether it be through affiliate marketing, selling something online, e-commerce, or network marketing, or some sort of opportunity where we are starting a business, right? Where we are selling something and somebody is giving us money for whatever that thing or service is. Am I correct? Right? We all do that because we know that we're not going to be able to have that time freedom working a 9-to-5 job. We may have a job that pays like six figures, but we have to work a lot, right? So we don't have that flexibility of that time freedom. But a lot of us, we run into some roadblocks. At least I know that I did. And one of the roadblocks was, and I didn't realize this until I was, asking for some help from a mentor, and he sat me down and he said, are you ready to be coached? And I was like, yes, I want to do this, but I don't know how to get out of this slump that I'm in. I keep, coming up with, zeros in my bank account. I keep coming up with zeros and with no sales, and I don't know what to do. And he shared with me, he was like, okay, the first thing that you need to do is you need to understand that the skills that you had that got you up to this point are not the skills that are going to progress you to the next point. And I said, I was like, huh? And he said, okay, so let me ask you. So what did you do before you decided to become an entrepreneur and to start a business? And I was like, oh, well, I was in the Air Force. I was an officer. I was a captain for the space and missile, branch. And he was like, okay, phenomenal. Awesome. He said, how long did you do that? And I said, I did that 8 years before I had completed my my service duty. And then, I retired and I got out, and then I came into the civilian world, and, then I decided I want to start a business. He was like, okay, phenomenal. Now, so like I said before, all of the things that you did in order to get to the point where you were in the Air Force, I was like, yeah. And then he listed out, he asked me a few more questions, and he asked me, so what specifically did you do? And I was like, well, I had to do this, and I had to learn this, I had to go to this class, and had to take, get this degree, and, so on and so forth. And he was like, okay. So all of those skills that you learned prepped you to be an excellent officer, right? All of those skills that you had mastered led you to what you did achieve in the military. Am I correct? And I was like, absolutely. Well, now that you've gotten out of the military, those same skills that you learned are not the same skills that are going to help you run a business. You need to learn some new skills. And at that point, I was like, oh, I think I get it now. He was like, absolutely. So in the military, you had a structured environment. Every detail was mapped out, right? You didn't have to figure out where you wanted to be stationed. It was that based upon your job and your skills and your level of rank, they had so many openings, and so your choice was limited. They either sent you here or there. Am I correct? I was like, yeah. And then you could live off base or you could live on base, but you had to be in this particular space or area in this state, whether it be overseas or here in the United States, and then you had to stay there for so many years. Am I correct? And I was like, yes. So everything was structured, everything was done for you. Okay, so you were basically a manager. You managed the organization that was already set up. And I was like, yeah, that was right. And the people that were already there, right? You didn't have to go and recruit any of those people that were on your team. Did you? No. They came in and, because of my rank and my position and because I earned that position, I was the one that was in charge. He was like, yeah, absolutely. Perfect. But now that you're starting a business, you have to set up those systems. You have to, develop, the skill set of marketing and sales, of people management, of, you have to to learn a little bit of law. You have to know to who to hire, and you have an accountant, and all of these things he listed out. And he was like, you didn't learn any of that in the military, so your military skills will help you to be diligent and will help you to be very detail oriented. And he said that's good, but you need to learn some new skills on top of that, and that is why you are struggling, because you haven't. And he asked me, he said, have you taken any courses, or have you purchased any programs to help you market or to help you sell? And I was like, no. He said, okay, so what have you been doing to try and get business? And I was like, well, just kind of talking to people, and I was asking. Basically, my pitch was, hey, if you know of anybody that needs to lose weight, because at that time I was starting a fitness business, and I got certified as a personal trainer. And he said, well, if you know anybody that needs to lose weight, I am available, and here's my rates, and so on and so forth. And it was like, okay. And so what's been happening? And I said, well, I'm not getting any bites. And he was like, absolutely, you're not. He said, of course, because you need to know how to sell, or you need to know how to sell. And the first rule of selling is you need to have a good hook. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And he said, it's basically something that's going to grab somebody's attention. Like, have you ever been fishing? And I was like, yeah, I've been fishing before. Okay, so you put something on the hook, as a little bit of a bait that's going to attract that fish, right? And then you throw it in the water where the fish are, and then the fish that are attracted to that particular bait are going to take a bite, and that's what you reel them in. I was like, yeah, that's pretty basic. Well, he said sales and marketing is the same thing, but it's a different skill set than what you were trained previously. You have to know how to attract people. Just presenting information to people is not going to attract them. You need to figure out what their problem is. You need to ask questions, right? And you know what? You could be talking, and I love this example because he used this example. He said, let's just say you're selling steak. And I was like, okay, right? And it could be the best steak ever. It could be grass-fed, grass-finished. It could have been raised perfectly. It had no hormones. It was out in the field eating the grass. I mean, it was absolutely perfect, and it is the best steak in the world. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. But if you're trying to sell that to a vegetarian, you're going to come up zero each and every time. A vegetarian doesn't care how good that steak is. They're not interested, right? So it is the wrong hook for the person that you're talking to. And so what I'm hearing from you is that the people that you have been talking to apparently do not have any interest in losing weight. And of course, they're not going to say, and they're being polite by saying, oh, okay, yeah, if I know of anybody, I'll let you know. They're just being polite. They're just, have you heard back from any of those people? No. And he said, how many people have asked you to, if you know of anybody, for whatever? Have you ever gotten back to them? No, not really. He was like, exactly, because it didn't interest you, right? And if it doesn't interest you, obviously you're not going to be, asking other people to go and purchase this thing, whatever it may be. And I was like, oh, I understand. So I share that story with you because a lot of times when we get into business, and I saw this a lot when I was building a network marketing business. And I still see it today with new entrepreneurs, new business owners. And I see it all the time with my friends that are still doing network marketing. And the problem is this, is that they never take the time to learn any new skills, to learn the skills that are going to help them to build a successful business. They don't even know most of the time what those skills are. They just jump into it and they're like, oh, okay. I mean, I don't know about you, if you've ever done network marketing, but you know what? I never considered the skills that it would take to actually, attract and sell customers, and then to be able to recruit and all that stuff. I didn't consider all that. I was like, ooh, this product is good. Oh, hey, you know what? I need to make some money. Oh, you can make some money from this? Okay, let's go ahead and do that, right? That's not how you get into business. I know a lot of people do, but that's why there's a huge failure rate in the direct selling business. In network marketing, because of that, right? You need to learn some skills. And so if you are struggling and you're not progressing in your business, the number one thing that you need to do is you need to learn a new skill, right? You need to learn how to market. You need to learn how to sell. You need to learn the language patterns that actually get people to want to buy. Those aren't, things that we learn out, at birth. Those are skills that are developed. And if you study any of the top entrepreneurs, they will tell you that when they first started, they sucked. But they had a mentor, they had determination. You know what? They bought a book or a course. They learned some stuff, they applied it, and then they bought another course and they got some more coaching, and then they learned some stuff and they applied it, and it was this gradual progression until the level that they're at right now. Right? Does that make any sense? So you need to learn some new skills. One of the things, it was funny, just today I got in a new book, Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson. And the whole point of the book that he wrote in this is, just like I was talking about, it was his experiences on how to use psychology, how to use direct response marketing in order to get people excited about the thing that you have, and getting them to buy, and to getting them to raise their hand and say, yes, I want that. And the purpose of him, and he tells that in the forward on why he wrote this book, was because his first book was all about utilizing online sales funnels. Right? And if you don't know anything about sales funnels, it's just a series of pages that leads a person from where they are to a sale. That's it. It's not a website. It's more of a strategic process to get people to a buying decision, right? But what he was noticing from that book, everyone got really excited, but what he was noticing is that there were still a lot of people that weren't having any success. And why? It was because they didn't know the words to put on that page, to put on those funnels in order to get people to buy. And so that was why he wrote his second book. I got it because I got his first book, but he updated it. So I got it again. But you know what? I wanted to know, and I wanted to improve on my skill set. My skills are still not where I need them to be. I'm still, in my opinion, I'm still an amateur. I'm still, kind of like, in elementary school. But I'm purchasing stuff so I could read it and learn it and apply it. I am moving forward. That conversation that I had with my first mentor about the skills that I had that got me up to this point are not the same skills that I am going to be utilizing in order to get me to the next point, or the next mountaintop, or the next result, for whatever reason. So like I said before, what could you be doing right now? What skill are you lacking in order for you to build your business, in order for you to get that next sale, in order for you to actually start getting some consistent sales? I'm going to give you my opinion, but you know what? And you could take this with a grain of salt, but this is from my experience after being in business for a number of years, and after struggling for 6 years without making a sale before I actually started, making some sales. And that number one skill is copywriting, knowing the words in order to attract the right customer and to get them to buy. that is a skill set that most business owners neglect. It's usually the technical part that they're really good at, right? I'm really good at getting the product, or I'm really good at setting up the website, or I'm really good at if you're doing a brick and mortar business, finding the property and all that stuff. They're good at that, but they're really lousy at what really brings them in revenue. And what is that? That's buying customers, attracting people, getting promotions going, knowing what to say to get people excited to come in, whether it's in front of you face to face, or it's by giving them your email address in order for you to actually follow up with them through electronic mail. Does that make any sense? So I would highly recommend getting Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson. I would also recommend getting any of the books that are written by Dan Kennedy. He is he's the GOAT of direct response marketing. He started back in the 70s with direct mail, where it was really hard to do that, because there was no sending out an email or anything like that. It was literally, you had to pay to send letters, and you had to send a lot of letters, because I think at that time, a really good sales promotion was like a 2% conversion rate. So they had like thousands. They had they had a list of like 20 or 30,000 people that they had to send letters to, and it wasn't just one letter. It was a series of like 4 or 5 letters that they had to send to people. So it was hard, right? And they had to come up with all that money for all that postage. And they had to come up with the money for all those addresses, to start their business. And so he started with that. So any of the books that are written by Dan Kennedy are excellent. That's what I would recommend to start brushing up on your skill set. You got to learn the psychology of sales. You got to learn what attracts people, what gets them to buy. And once you do that, you will be able to write your ticket. So many people that I've been working with and ask me questions. That's what their number one question is like, okay, so how do I sell this? Okay, so this is what I'm doing. How do I go about getting sales? And it always comes down to, you got to learn the skills of sales and marketing. You got to learn the principles of direct response marketing, because once you do that, the sky's the limit, because everything else you could hire somebody to do all that technical stuff. The hard part is learning the language patterns and the words to put in front of people to get them to want to reach their hand in their pocket, pull out their credit card, and actually give it to you so they can get what you have to offer them. Does that make sense? So that's all that I have for you today. I hope you got some value out of this. Again, go and look up those people. Russell Brunson. Go look up Dan Kennedy. If you have not purchased any of their books, I don't recommend purchasing. If you're just starting out, you don't need to purchase one of those coaching programs, right? Everything that they would coach you on is in a book. And if you're just starting out, I'm assuming that expenses are a little bit tight. Am I right? And if you are in that situation, then you need to be smart. I don't recommend going into debt in order to get a program that you may or may not follow when you haven't had the track record of actually following through to begin with, right? So start with one of their books. Go through all of that. Start learning and applying and taking notes. And then at that point, when you're starting to make some sales, then you can take that to that next level, which would be one of their coaching programs. But if you look at all of the top level entrepreneurs, they all have books. They all have done something. They've poured all of their knowledge in. And you know what? If you don't have like the $19 to go get their book, or if you don't have like, the $9.95 to pay for the shipping, because some of them have free plus shipping offers. If you don't have that, go do some extra jobs in order to get some extra money to pay for that, in order to get your skill level up to a point where you can start making some consistent sales. That's what I would recommend. So I hope you got some value out of this. As always, I'm going to talk to you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening, and you have an awesome day. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to me. Until next time, keep moving forward.